What's going on, FA Nation? John Impemba here with Sean Mitchell, bringing you the Fantasy Alarm NBA DFS live stream for Thursday, December 26th. Sean, day after Christmas, everybody's getting the holiday hangover, over with, and now we have a 6-game NBA slate. You were the man on the playbook today. How are things going for you?
It's good. I really like the slate. I know we were kind of talking a little bit before about how it seems like everybody is active. We got Luka Doncic back.
Yeah.
Not really sure how that's going to go with his usage rate and how much minutes he's going to play. But other than that, man, it seems like a really good slate. A lot of good spots, a lot of pace on this slate. So pretty excited about it, to be honest.
Good pace, a lot of high totals too. The lowest game total on this slate is 220.5, and that's in our late night hammer game, Portland, Utah. Spread wise, everything's sort of right in the middle there too. 6.5, 7.5. The lowest, Minnesota, Sacramento's the Kings are giving 5. Utah giving 5 to Portland, and then the highest we have here, Dallas is giving 7.5 to San Antonio, and Brooklyn giving 7.5 to the Knicks. So it's not really like a huge favorite, not very close spreads either. So a lot of it's really nice. Yeah, high totals, relatively competitive games we're expecting. And as we mentioned before, a lot of the players that were questionable today all end up getting ruled active. So
it's always great when you don't have a lot of injury news to deal with before the slate starts. So that's always beautiful.
What do you think? The top player ruled out today so far has been Luke Kennard, right? Like there hasn't been like anybody else, and we're waiting on Towns. Obviously, he's still questionable. We do not have that news yet, so that's obviously the biggest name. And then on the flip side of that game, Bogdan Bogdanovic, if he's ruled in or out, could have an impact on some of that rotation, maybe some value there. So, Danilo Gallinari is ruled out again. So that opens up a little value because they did start the rookie Basley there. And he'll be starting likely again here this evening. But, Sean, let's jump into it. Like I said, we got 6 games. We'll go over this position by position that you have in your playbook that you did. For at the top of your playbook at the point guard position, I mean, nobody has been as good, I don't think, consistently as Spencer Dinwiddie's been since he took over that starting role. Price tag on him really doesn't move much. He's still in that low 8K range. DraftKings did finally bump him up to 87, but FanDuel's still at 81. And he's performing at that level, so he's definitely worth the cost.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, he's been one of the most consistent players over the last 10 or so games. I mean, he's averaging around 38 fantasy points. I mean, gets a really good spot here at home against New York. He's averaged, put over 45 fantasy points in his last 3 games. He's got just a beautiful floor. As long as Kyrie continues to stay out, I think he's going to continue to be the guy. He's got massive usage rate, over 32%. So there's really nothing to not like about Spencer Dinwiddie. Like, you can't really find a flaw in his game right now. So it's just one of those spots where if you can afford to fit him in and make your lineup be comfy, I think you got to go with it. I mean, especially I know it's hard in cash for sure, but yeah, he's definitely a cash play.
Yeah, in 2 games against the Knicks this year, it's over 30 minutes. He's averaging 37 fantasy points, and he's getting the benefit. Alfred Payton starting. These days for the Knicks, and we know Payton's defense historically pretty bad. Currently sitting at 113 on the year as well. So going up against bad defense, he's already having success against them, and just all of the usage rate is also in his core too. So Dinwiddie, a really great play. I think again on this smaller slate, not many people have the upside really of a Dinwiddie. We obviously Luka, if he's going to go and play 40 minutes, he's going to lead the slate. Drummond can get there for you, but outside of that, there's not many people that have potential 50+ fantasy point upside like Dinwiddie does. If we're looking down, Chris Paul gets home game against the Memphis Grizzlies. He's actually projected to be pretty high ownership for today's slate, which I think to me maybe a little bit surprising. But again, it's a good spot here, pace up against the Thunder.
Yeah, agree. I totally agree. He's cheap enough. He's right around that spot where you can still afford a little bit extra around him. And, of course, he just, put 35 fantasy points in this last game against the Grizzlies 3 games ago. He's been playing really, really well. I mean, the matchup is great. We know Morant's not that great on the defensive side. Memphis has been a team that we've targeted all year long as far as the point guard spot. Of course, like I said, it's just a rematch. He's had great success against them already. Price is good. Should be nice flow in this game. So I'm totally fine with Chris Paul. I think the price is fair.
Yeah, definitely not too bad. But I think for me personally, though, I have more interest in the guy that's just below him in the price points, and that's De'Aaron Fox. I mean, I wish, maybe we were seeing a trend with how they handled Fox with what they're going to do with Bagley, because they're starting Bagley now, and they limited him, and they did that with Fox a little bit. They put him in the starting lineup, but limited, and finally they unleashed him. We saw 37 minutes out of Fox the other night, and he absolutely went off in that matchup against, it was a Houston, going for 52 fantasy points. And now he gets Minnesota, a matchup that we have been killing against point guards all season long. Fox at 7K for me, especially in GBP, is much more appealing, I think, than Chris Paul. But again, both solid plays.
Yeah, I was kind of lost whenever I saw Fox's price, because I was like, that is just too short. I mean, especially seeing the minutes that he saw last game. We saw a nice little ceiling game out of him, and we know that the upside's there. We know that he can easily have 40-point upside. And tonight at 7K, I think there's tons of value on Fox. I think there's tons and tons of value. Love the spot. He's at home. Of course, as you mentioned, Minnesota against point guards.
Also, a big pace-up game for them. I mean, Sacramento, believe it or not, is the slowest paced team in the NBA. Minnesota, 7th.
Ranked over their last 5 games. Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah, so I mean, they've
been really slow. They've been really slow. They're not a fast team, but this is a massive pace spot with Minnesota coming to town. Minnesota has been hanging around that top 10 as far as pace goes all year long. So they typically run with pace. Even if Karl Anthony Towns is back, that's still not going to change the pace at all. So totally agree. I think Fox is great. Your boy's next here with Dennis Schroeder. I know you love and want to talk about Dennis Schroeder, and I'm with you. I mean, the guy's been excellent. Been playing really well. He's leading the team in usage. So how do you feel about Schroeder over like a Fox, or do you think you still pay for Fox?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're fortunate that obviously on DraftKings you do have that multiple position eligibility where he's also shooting guard eligible. You can play him at the guard, you can put him at the util. FanDuel is a shooting guard. I think especially on the small slate on FanDuel where you're forced into the lack of position eligibility, he's a must for lineups today. But we talked about it on the podcast last night. Over the last 2 weeks, 30% usage rate leads the team. 1.20 fantasy points per minute leads the team. Dennis Schroeder, though coming off the bench, no reason to be worried about that. He is just, he's dominant. I mean, this is what I was been talking about before regular season started in seasonal leagues. I was telling people to target Dennis Schroeder because Paul George and Westbrook were gone. That usage is gone. It's got to go somewhere. And we know Schroeder was a huge usage play in Atlanta. It took him a little bit. He got off to a slow start, but I mean, I think even he's exceeding my expectations for what I thought he could do. And the sites just are not touching his price tag. Got a little bit of a bump on DraftKings. FanDuel, he's still too cheap.
Gotta
play him. Until he's like 7,500, you play him. Like he's just too cheap.
I totally agree. And of course, again, he's projected to not even be hardly owned. I mean, you're looking at a 6-game slate. He's looking at 16% owned on DraftKings, 10% owned on FanDuel, where he's a little bit cheaper. So It's crazy. It's crazy. I know he doesn't have a lot of the extra peripherals as far as, he's a big-time scoring guard, shoots the ball decently well, but, he does every once in a while come up with a steal or so. So, I mean, he does, but at the same time, he's just a big scoring guard.
Yeah, it's the last handful of weeks is when he's turned it up. If you look, 25 points per game, 5 rebounds and 6 assists, because you're right. On the year, he's only averaging 3 and 3, but for whatever reason, taking over that second unit, he's becoming much more involved in grabbing boards, being aggressive, and it's killed his fantasy value in terms of good in a good way. We just got word Elf Payton is starting again tonight too. So
they really don't have anybody else on that second unit with Schroeder. I mean, he is the whole second unit. So totally agree. The next I got Elf Payton, of course, but right before him I have Derrick Rose. I know Bruce Brown said he's going to try to play. I'm not really sure the extent of that. I'm not really sure if he's going to see his regular 28 to 30 minutes. But nonetheless, without Kennard, and I put in the playbook without Bruce Brown, Derrick Rose sees his usage rate goes up to a little bit over 32%, which is really good. He's been playing really good lately. He's been a usage monster, as we see. Gets a great spot here against Washington, who's allowing basically the number one most fantasy points to the point guard spot over the last 5 and basically all season. I mean, any spot that Washington has, they've literally been in the top 10, top 5 as far as opposing positions. So I think Derrick Rose, he's actually not even projected to be that high owned, which is pretty nuts. So
I like Rose. I have my problem with him is that he's definitely minutes capped. Like he doesn't ever play more than 25 or 26 minutes, and it's not that he hasn't gone for 40 plus fantasy points playing 25 or 26 minutes. It's definitely within his game. Usage rates through the roof, like you said. It's just like on nights where if he gets off to a slightly cold start, if that first rotational shift for him, he doesn't come out of it with like 8 points and like a couple of assists or something. You're not going to get that upside, because he's not going to be on the floor long enough to make up for it. So that's always my worry with Rose. But again, it's a really great spot against Washington. Hard to really argue too much with that. And again, smaller slates, few guys sort of have that ability to pop like Rose does. So I don't hate it. Again, we mentioned Elf Payton's going to be in that starting lineup tonight. Started again the other day. Another guy that they're really not touching his price too much, despite the fact that I think he just went for 35 the other day, fantasy points or something like that now. Back-to-back games with 35 fantasy points. Keep riding the Elf train, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, he's a triple-double guy at the end of last year, and he's back-to-back games with 10-plus assists. And the shot's not dropping, but eventually a few more of those shots drop, and he could be 40-plus fantasy points. So I'm all in on Elf Payton tonight.
Yeah, I really can't argue any fact of that, especially with him starting again. We can likely, he's seen 27 and 30 minutes in his last two. He's put up over 30 fantasy points in his last 3 of 5 games. If we can continue to see this kind of elf and he's going to get 27 or more minutes, then I don't really see. Obviously, the price is going to catch on eventually, but you might, it's kind of like we said about a few guys already. You better jump on it now before it goes up, because I guarantee you, if he has another 30-plus point tonight, he's going to be over maybe 6.5K come next slate.
He should be. We'll see. We'll see if that's true, but he should be. Yeah, definitely get on it. If we go over to shooting guard, you have Bradley Beal. We're talking no-brainer here, in my opinion, against Detroit. Taking all the shots, playing all the minutes. Fantasy production really never wavers from him either. At best, maybe he's going to see Derrick Rose defensively at times tonight. Like, you talk about the top spend-ups here in Luka or Drummond. Beal's got the ability to lead them all in scoring.
Yeah, he's top 50 fantasy points in his last 4 of 6. His usage rate is over 33% at 33.7%. He is this whole team. I know I was watching the starting 5 from Adam Ronis earlier and said he took like 38 shots last game.
Yeah.
Like that. Just nuts, kind of D'Angelo Russell type numbers as far as field goal attempts go. He's all that they have. I know that we kind of talked about them getting a few guys back tonight. They're getting Jordan McRae. Jonathan Williams, I think, is coming back.
Yeah. Signed Jonathan Williams from Europe, I think it was. So
yeah. I believe they were getting somebody else back that I'm not thinking of right now.
They had Peyton join their team.
Yeah, Gary Payton joined. Yeah. Maybe I guess I'm thinking of another team. But, they're getting a few pieces back, but nonetheless, he's still going to have a monster usage rate. None of those guys are going to steal a lot of his usage. His price is, it is what it is. But he can, and he has put up over 50 fantasy points. So we know that is there. But the next one I was looking at was Donovan Mitchell, and I was wondering, because I was looking at his price. He's 8.1 on DraftKings, 7.6 on FanDuel.
Yeah.
Was really kind of wondering why his DK price went up as much as it did. But nonetheless, he's actually had a 34.1% usage rate over his last 5 home games. Portland is terrible, as we know, against pretty much every spot. One of the biggest weaknesses is the point guard and shooting guard spot. So I started to look into it more once I saw the 8.1 price tag. And, he's put up over 40 fantasy points in his last 6 or 7 games. So I think the price is warranted. I think he's a great cash play because we know he's going to see, plenty of time on the floor. He plays over 33 minutes a game. And his floor is just so good, especially going over 40 for so many times. So the spot's great. The matchup's great. What are you thinking on the next one? What do you think? I know your boy Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Yeah, SGA is certainly, again, a guy that has gone up and down a little bit this year, but you're looking at recent game performances, and he's killing it. Him and Schroeder basically, 1-2 punch there. SGA now over 40 fantasy points in 3 straight games as well. Everything I say about Schroeder, you can basically say about Gilgeous-Alexander. He's a little bit more expensive than Schroeder tonight, so maybe if anything, maybe they'll keep a little bit of ownership off him if you think people are sort of coin flipping who to play if they don't want to play both. I'm personally playing both tonight on DraftKings. I have them both in my lineup here against Memphis. They don't really cut into each other. If you look at the last couple of weeks, they're 1 and 2 in usage, 1 and 2 in fantasy points per minute. So, it's not as if they're risking a scenario where one's going to go off, the other one's going to struggle. It's not the case. So, love them. Good spot here against Memphis, who we went for 40 against a couple nights ago. You can definitely ride into it for sure. I'm more curious about the next guy that you have here because, again, Fox is back, Bagley's back, and I don't know if there's a coincidence there, but Buddy Hield has not been good now for 4 or 5 games.
Right. Yeah. I was hoping we could talk about Buddy Hield because I wanted to talk, and it's clearly a GPP play. I think he's a great tournament dart, and I say that because he's at one of his cheapest prices that we've seen him all season long, and that we will see him all season long. The simple fact that the volume is still there. He still has over a 25% usage rate. He's still taking 15 plus shots a night on most nights. He is at home. I think it's a great spot. It gets Minnesota in a pace-up spot here at home, who we know has struggled against both spots, point guard, shooting guard spots. And I just think this is a great buy low spot because, as I put in the playbook, you don't want to be on the wrong side of a guy that has been slumping and then he has a ceiling game. We know Buddy can do it. We've seen him. He before this, in his last 2 home games before he played the Rockets last game, he put up, I think it was 44 and 56 fantasy points, or 41 and 56. Right. So we saw the upside, of course. Those were without Fox, but they had Bagley back. So interestingly enough, I think that Hield is very interesting tonight, and I am going to play him in tournaments. And I just think that this could be one of those nights where you see Buddy go for 40 plus, and nobody's going to play him. He's projected to be 9% on what is that, FanDuel? FanDuel, and like 10% on DraftKings. Yeah. Nobody's going to own him. So I'm totally fine with the spot. I like the spot. I think, like I said, I think he's a good GPP dart, and I think it's a buy low situation.
Yeah, I won't argue with you too much. I definitely think it's a buy low. He's just been so bad that the floor.
Nobody's going to play him. Exactly.
Yeah, no one's going to play him. And the floor that he, at least early in the year, he had a floor of 25 fantasy points. And you're all right, but now it's he's gone into the teens at times in recent games, and
we talked about it last night on the pod too. Literally he's not hit more than 3 shots in his last 4 games.
Right.
But like I said, the volume's still there. He's still taking 12 to 15 shots a game. If he starts to hit those shots, and especially those 3-pointers on DraftKings, he can really put up a big line. So, all right, yeah. I mean, I'm good. Like I said, I'm totally fine with the fade too. I think he's just a big-time GPP play, and I don't know. We'll see, I guess.
I like your I want to know what you think about your value call here because you do have Damian Dotson in the playbook. With Marcus Morris active now and starting, do you come off Dotson, or do you still think at 35 and 3,600 there's some value to him being there?
Well, that was merely due to the fact that Marcus Morris had missed last game. I thought with an Achilles injury that he might potentially veer to the side of sitting again.
Yeah.
He still has seen 23 or more minutes in his last 3 or 4 games, so it's not like it's a total, shot in the wind. I think you can play some Damian Dotson, as he's projected to be under 1% owned in both sites, major sites. Nobody's going to own him. At 3.5K, 3.6K, he really doesn't have to do a whole lot. So in 23 minutes of floor time, you can really project that anybody could probably top value at 15 to 16 points. So I don't exactly hate it. I think he's definitely a filler spot for a GPP or something if you need to go down that far. You're trying to fit in Luka or, with a Drummond line or something if you're trying to do that. I'm totally fine with some Damian Dotson. I think he's fine.
If we want to go on over to the small forward position, you do have DDR listed there. How are you feeling? I mean, the price tag, again, coming down for him, coming off, his ceiling game. Something that we haven't seen a bunch from him this year, but going against Dallas, he's going to get presumably Tim Hardaway defensively, who's not a good defender. Are you in on DDR here?
Absolutely, and that's kind of why I had him over Wiggins, and I had a big decision to make there. I know that Wiggins is, is he shooting guard on FanDuel or is he small forward? He's shooting guard, right?
Yeah, he's a shooting guard. Yeah, on FanDuel he's a shooting guard. Yeah, he's small forward shooting guard on DraftKings.
Of course, I typically go off of DraftKings lineups, and he's typically more of a small forward over there. So I had a decision to make between him and DeRozan, and I went with DeRozan just because of the simple fact that I think his price is so much more fair. I think Wiggins is 7.8 on DraftKings, and you're getting DeRozan at 6.5K. The guy's fresh off of almost a 52 fantasy point game. It's really hard. He's playing over 30 minutes a game. He's basically the leading usage player on the team, other than LaMarcus Aldridge. I don't know. It's hard to say.
So
he's put up 34 fantasy points in every single game.
Big news, Sean. Big news. Luka Doncic will not have a minutes limit.
Right. That's
what we're looking for. So
that is what we were looking for. I mean, it's better to get that news now and to know than to go into it with saying, because I mean, there were reports earlier this morning saying that he might be a little bit limited, that they would monitor his minutes. And now that they're coming out saying, hey, no minutes limit.
Is he your must play now? Is he like your number one here against San Antonio?
I don't know, man. I just really don't know if I can still pay Harden price. I mean, don't get me wrong. We know what he was doing beforehand. We know his usage rate was close to 40%. He was putting up 60 or 70 fantasy points a night. But he's been off for how many games? I mean,
4, I think. I think it was 4.
4 games? Is that all he's missed?
Yeah.
So he's only been out for maybe a week and a half?
Yeah, about that.
I don't know,
man. Got hurt on the 14th, so we're looking
26. We're looking at 12 days.
Yeah, 2 weeks. He was hurt. Yeah, he was hurt 2 Saturdays ago.
Okay, that's crazy to think that he's going to come right back. And I mean, I guess that ankle injuries are tough. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure
he's 78 fantasy points the game before getting hurt.
Yeah. So let me ask you, how do you feel? And do you feel really comfy playing him at almost $12,000 on DraftKings, knowing that he's fresh off an injury, knowing that he hasn't played in almost 2 weeks? How do you feel, and what's your analysis going?
So my biggest issue is fitting him in a lineup that I feel comfortable with, because you and I have been discussing this today. I've had pains trying to get DeAndre Drummond or whatever, Andre Drummond in my lineup here. Right. The 10, even at 10K or 10 that he is, there's just no value that I trust.
Exactly. That was going to be my next question. Is like, what value do you even get in your lineup now?
Yeah,
with him being full go. I mean, I know we talked about the Bogdan news. Waiting to see if you maybe get like an Ariza.
Maybe get Ariza in at 4K. Balsley's going to start at 37 on DraftKings. Yeah. But he's gone for 23 back to back. I think that's going to be a popular punt play tonight, but there isn't that surefire, 3,700 starter tonight, that you can kind of throw in there. So
solid value to go along with paying $12K on Luka. Yeah, and that was my biggest, as far as even playing him and knowing that he was playing, that was my biggest quarrel, was just being able to fit him in. There's just really virtually no way to feel comfortable trying to get him in another decent piece of value, or decent piece at 7 to 8K guy. It's really hard to get. So yeah, it's gonna be tough. I mean, if you can do it, my hat is off to you. But I think it's still gonna be a fade for me, and I'll just deal with the repercussions later. At least I'll get more family time if he goes off by that time. So it's a win, I guess.
All right. He did just sign that Jordan Shoe deal. So do we have a Jordan Shoe deal narrative?
Oh man, so consider narratives too. I might just unredge all my tournaments and just have fun.
What you need to do, Sean? You got to play the Showdown Dallas slate.
I've actually been doing pretty fair on the Showdown slate, so that might be pretty good.
Play the Showdown Dallas, get your Luka exposure there, and get all your money back.
I can hedge my tournament lineups with the Showdown, right?
Yeah. I think that's fair play there. All right, so we got DeRozan. Joe Ingles is someone that you have on there. I know you and I had the back and forth on the podcast. Because I just don't know what's gonna happen with Jordan Clarkson. He passed his physical. He's gonna play tonight. Where does he play? How does he play with the new unit? Does he just get a little taste of the floor because he's only been there for a week? So all of those things to me bother me about the Utah rotation, because Clarkson is a guy that when he gets on the floor, he shoots. That's just what they bring him in for. They've said they're bringing him in the boost of the second unit offense. Ingles at least isn't really a guy we rely on for the scoring numbers, but it helps his overall value. It helps, it's a reason why he's $6,000, and not $4,700, because he was giving you double-digit scoring to go along with everything else. So, you have him in the playbook. I know we have decent ownership on him, and you've talked about him in chat today. He's obviously somebody you're still in on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially on FanDuel being at 5.3K, I think that's just silly price for him. 34 more minutes in his last like 7 games. His usage rate is fine. As you mentioned, the assists are there, so he's adding, he's padding the stats really nicely. And yeah, I like him on DraftKings for the 3-point upside, and I still think he's fine at 6.2K. I really don't mind it. I don't think that he sees just like a massive dip, and I don't think that I can still see him playing 30 plus minutes. I don't think that it's really going to affect him as much as I think as we think it could. I think
Right.
it will affect like Manuel Mudiay and some guys in that second unit. As far as I think Ingles, I think he's just earned it now so far. As the way he's been playing, they've continued to give him, like I said, massive minutes. He's played 37 or more in like his last 3 or 4. Put up over 30 fantasy points in his last 7 games. I mean, he's hard not to like. We know we know if he's going to get 30 plus minutes, I'm totally fine with him at 6.2K, and that's what I think he gets. So that's kind of where I'm at on Ingles. Yeah, big fan of Ingles. Still like him quite a bit.
The guy that I guess it's funny to see the pricing or the ownership discrepancy here is Troy Brown Jr. He's not going to start. Didn't start the other day. On DraftKings, we only have him for 3% ownership. On FanDuel, he's 20%. Are you buying back into Troy Brown tonight? In the spot against Detroit?
I mean, it's a great spot. Detroit, terrible against most spots. They're without Kennard, who's one of their better defenders. I don't know if I can buy in now with, Washington getting back Jordan McRae on that second unit that's going to come in. And, being 12K or 1.2K more than he is on FanDuel, I can see why he's 20% owned on FanDuel. Because at 5K, I would probably feel a lot more comfortable maybe sliding him in. But at 6.2, and it's literally due just to recency bias because he just had a monster game, 52.8 fantasy points. But if you look at his game logs before that on DraftKings, he barely topped 23 fantasy points. He, had a few at 27, but literally like 1 or 2 that had topped 30. So if you think that he's going to come back out and put up another 50-point game, I think that's highly unlikely. I think it's highly unsustainable for him. It was a ceiling game, and I'll probably look to pivot as far as that price goes on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I think I'm totally fine if you want to eat that chalk. So that's kind of where I'm at on him as far as DraftKings goes. I think it's going to be a fade for me and probably play somebody like my next guy in Joe Harris at 5.7, who I know is going to see 30-plus minutes most of the nights. He's put up 35 and 39 in his last 2 of 3. He's a mixed bag. You're going to get, what you get with Joe Harris. But we've both liked him most of the season. He's in a great spot here against the Knicks. The Knicks have been allowing, I think, the third most fantasy points to the small forward spot over the last 5 games. And it's just a good spot for him. If he's hitting his shots, like I mentioned in the playbook, he has, over his last 5 games, he has a 61.5 true shooting percentage, which is just absolutely nuts. He's just one of the best shooters in the game. He's going to continue to, he can do a little bit of everything as well. So it's not like he's just a shooter. He can rebound. He can, dish out dimes, and he can do stuff on the defensive side of the ball. So I'm a pretty good fan of Joe Harris, especially at 4.6 on FanDuel, and he's only slated to be 17%. Yeah, I think that would probably be the good pivot all in all from Troy Brown for me.
I got him overrun off my FanDuel lineup tonight. Joe Harris is sort of fitting into some of the builds there at 4,600. Pretty good spot for him there. You have DFS there, Dorian Finney-Smith, a guy that I go back and forth with every once in a while, because he is a peripheral stat guy. He doesn't rely on the scoring to get you fantasy points. I find him to be a better option usually on FanDuel because if he gets you the steals or blocks, you get the extra point there. Low ownership there. Luka obviously coming back. I just feel like it does impact the team. I mean, like he is such a high usage rate player, but Finney-Smith isn't a usage rate guy in his own right, so maybe it won't have too much of an impact on him, other than maybe he sees 1 or 2 less shots.
Yeah, and of course, I put him in this playbook thinking that probably Luka wouldn't play or that he would be limited. So I'll probably draw back a little bit on DFS because of the simple fact that, in his last 4 games, he's put up 30, 23.3, 27.5, and 25.3. So if you're talking about decreasing his production by even the slightest, that means he's going to probably under 20 fantasy points. Right. And at 4.4 or even 4.2, that's just something that you really can't have. So it was kind of one of those plays where it was iffy. When I was writing the playbook, I was like, okay, well, I think maybe Luka could sit. And if he did, then definitely he would have been a plug, especially like a cash value plug. So that's kind of the reasoning that I had him in there. Do I still think he's a bad play? No. But do I still think he'll get maybe 28 to 30 minutes? I can highly see it. I don't think that he might get the kick as far as, THJ starting. What were they? DFS was starting whenever when Luka was there.
Yep.
So, again, I don't think he's going to lose a ton of minutes, but the production I could definitely see taking a dip. Obviously, I mean,
yeah, he actually has the lightest decrease with Luka on the floor. It's a 0.2% negative usage rate decrease there for DFS. The player with the most hit there, or in terms of fantasy point per minute production with Luka on the floor, is Kristaps Porzingis. You do have him obviously at your power forward. With Luka on the floor, Kristaps 23% usage rate, 1.06 fantasy points per minute. If you were to take Luka off the floor like he had been when we've been all about, Porzingis there, his usage rate was incredibly high. It was 29%, 1.44. So losing about 6% in usage rate, losing about 4.4 fantasy points per minute production. Are you paying up for Porzingis, sort of knowing, how he was playing at least previously with Luka on the floor?
No, not now. We saw, KP was struggling big time when Luka was there. When Luka plays, KP sees, what a regular power forward would see. He's not, obviously he needs that usage to be good.
Yeah.
And he's definitely not going to get it now. And he's definitely not going to get it tonight with, Luka being a full go. So, yeah, definitely paying $9K and 8.3. There's no way. I'd definitely rather just pivot down to the next guy, LaMarcus Aldridge, who has actually been tearing it up lately and nobody ever plays him. Still, he's 6.8% projected to be on DraftKings, which
he's another guy that got off to a slow start this year, and I think people have sort of written him off a little bit. But, yeah, production has definitely been there.
Sure. I mean, Dallas is giving up the 7th most fantasy points to the power forward spot over the last 5. Marcus Aldridge is fresh off a 65.8 fantasy point ceiling game against the Grizzlies. It seems like everybody's torching the Grizzlies lately. Yeah. They're not really good on defense. But nonetheless, yeah, LMA has been one of the most consistent producers for the Spurs other than, DeMar DeRozan. And, yeah, his price was really insanely cheap there for a little bit. We were getting him at 6.3 or 6.2. And I still don't think that his price is actually where it should be. I think he should be probably closer to 8K. He's put up 40 or more fantasy points in his last 3 or 4, going over 37 in his last 3 on the road. So, I'm a big fan of LMA today, and I really hope that projection is correct at 7% on DraftKings because I have quite a bit of LaMarcus Aldridge. So, I'm a big fan of LaMarcus Aldridge tonight.
All righty. Let's go down a little bit further. We're getting close to wrapping it up here. Other power forwards that you do have listed, Carmelo Anthony and Jaren Jackson. How are you feeling about those two guys? Do you favor one over the other?
I think Carmelo is just too cheap again. I was talking about Jaren Jackson earlier. He, got in some foul trouble in this same spot 3 games ago, only put up like 19 fantasy points, had a terrible outing. But most of the time we can consider him to be a lock for almost 30 fantasy points. He's usually great. But Carmelo just seems to be doing a lot better lately. In his last 4, 38.8, 35, 46, and 41. So he's been crushing his value as far as that price is. And he gets a decent spot here against Utah. Utah has not been known for their defense this year, especially at the power forward spot. They were in the top 5 of points allowed or fantasy points against for a good bit. So I think Carmelo is totally fine here on the road, and especially at his price. So I'd probably lean Carmelo at the price because you're getting a little bit of a discount.
Yeah. I am curious with Jackson only because he's probably he'll end up facing up against Basley this time around, or Ballsy, or however they pronounce it. I think it was Gallinari was active in that first meeting, so a little bit of an easy spot for him. We just got the Detroit Pistons starting lineup. We're talking about value. Tim Frazier is starting again, $3,500 on DraftKings. And then Svi, not going to get him, pronounce his last name, not going to get it, not going to do it well. $3,700 also in the starting lineup. We know that you said earlier Bruce Brown was going to try to go, maybe go. He's not starting. And we know Derrick Rose off the bench. So if you want to talk about value now, Tim Frazier starting against Washington at $3,500. I mean, that's your route to fitting in a Luka Doncic.
Revenge spot as well.
Yeah, and a great spot as well for him. So I just want to get that news out there. Blake Griffin also starting. He was in the Value Vault article. I don't want to go there, but again, super great matchup for him. He hasn't been good. But $5,600, I think he is on DraftKings. Is such a cheap price tag to be very difficult. Or 68, sorry, on DraftKings. At 56 on FanDuel, I think it is. Just a very cheap cost there. So I just want to get those two takes in there before we jump over and finish off at center.
Definitely a big one.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. Frazier's a big one. All I want, you put on the playback, I want all the Drummond. We still want all the Drummond.
I still want
it. 9,500 is insane for FanDuel. Got to play him there.
Even at 10K on DK, though. I mean, I know he's only 25% projected ownership, and I think I'm totally fine with that. Like, this is just like the best smash spot that you can possibly have for a center spot. Washington has been giving it up to every single opposing center. You're talking about one of the best ones in the game right now. This is an elite play. I think his price should be more like 11K, and he can easily go for 55, 60 fantasy points tonight. And if he gets a little froggy there, I wouldn't put out like a 70-point game. So I'm not going to call it a triple-double or anything for him, but I think that he could easily have like a 20-20 game or more. I mean, so that's kind of.
You won't make the triple-double call? Not like our.
I'm not going to make the triple-double call, but I mean, I could see like 3 or 4 steals as his steals numbers have been nuts, averaging 2 a game. A couple blocks. So if you throw in three or 4 steals, 3 to 4 blocks, and he gets a 25 to 20 game, you're talking about 65.
He's a center averaging almost 2 steals and 2 blocks, which I think is, I don't think we've seen that number since like maybe Nerlens Noel 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. So big numbers there.
Yeah, still want them all.
Yep. Whiteside for probably DraftKings only at 7,700. But it's a tough spot going against Gobert, but. Gobert hasn't really been the greatest defender lately either. No. I think both these guys could probably just have good games against one another, just grabbing defensive rebounds and scoring basically on each other. So I think he's fine. Probably the other center that I like a lot tonight is Valanciunas. Had a good spot here against Adams the other game, a couple games ago.
Good 40 fantasy points.
Yeah, 40 fantasy points. Andy's been very productive.
7% owned on DraftKings, 2% on FanDuel.
2% at 6,600 for a 40+ upside guy is great.
That's nuts. Yeah, I really like him a lot more now that I see the projections on the ownership, because he's went for 40 or more in his last like 3 or 4 games. It's not like it's just happened. Like he's been beasting, and he's really cheap. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Jonas. I'm a big fan of Valanciunas today. Big fan.
Yep, I agree with you. Any other guys that you want to talk about before we jump off here?
I mean, DeAndre Jordan, I talk about him, I think about every single time I talk about a slate that he's on. He's just one of those guys that we've seen in his last game put up 50 fantasy points. We know that he's got a ceiling around that. We know that his floor has been generally around 23 to 24 fantasy points. So being at 5K, you need right around 25 for value. He's averaging that. And I think that is right around his floor. So I think that against New York, who typically is okay against the center spot, not greatest, I think it's a good spot. I don't think anybody's going to be on him. And if he gives you 35 fantasy points, then you're going to be well above the curve, considering he's 1.5% projected on DraftKings and 0.5% on FanDuel. So he's about the only other one I wanted to talk about. Other than that, I'm great.
All right. It is 6:40. Lineups are out. Everything's out. Everything's content-wise, and we're in chat to help you out up until roster log. So good luck, everybody. We'll talk to you later.